Welcome back to the Press Box Preps Edition. I'm Daily Chronicle sports editor John Stife, and I'm here with sports reporter Nick Gertz and sports reporter John Sally. This week we've got Joe Ryan, a little interview with him heading into the Sycamore-Canelan game, but let's start out with last week's Sycamore-DeKalb game. Big disappointment for DeKalb. They got beat 35-12. What do they take out of this?
A huge disappointment. 0-3 right now to start the season, and I know that's not what they wanted. They were looking at maybe 2-1, maybe even 3-0 because they beat Sycamore last year, but this has got to be really tough for Kurt Johansson right now. He thought this was going to be the year that they make that next step to the playoffs. I mean, they went one win from his first year, 3 last year, and they were hoping to maybe finally crack the playoffs since 1989, I want to say. So, unfortunately, that's not going to happen this year.
All right, and what does a rivalry loss like this take out of a team?
Oh, it could take out a lot. I mean, when you're looking at it, this is the game that everyone looks forward to. And 7 straight years prior to last year, I mean, they lost those games against Sycamore. And it could be one of those things where it saves the season or it could pick the team up. And unfortunately, it probably isn't going to do either.
All right, and it's become a numbers game for them now. They're down to 31 guys. They had 6 or 7 that are injured still. How do they even suit up against Yorkville on Friday?
Who knows? You might see some freshmen and sophomores called up, or you might be seeing some more players play on both sides. It's something that happened to them 2 years ago, 2 or 3 years ago actually. They were down to mid-20s on the roster, and they did just that. And that's where we actually got to see Kyle Welling, I want to say, make his start in one of those situations. So you might be seeing the future of DeKalb come through and go up against Yorkville this week.
And going from the gloom and doom to Genoa, Kingston, and Sycamore, both 3-0 right now. I had a chance earlier today to catch up with Joe Ryan, and we'll listen to that interview right here. I feel like your team's at right now.
Well, it's just a start. I mean, we're basically 1-0 in a conference that's very tough.
Canelan was a team that had problems on defense last year. What have you seen differently out of them this year?
And I'm not saying they weren't sound last year. I think they had a lot of injuries last year, so they had a lot of kids playing out of position.
Right. Offensively, you guys have had 3 big games. Are there any people that you're particularly impressed with so far?
Well, I think everything starts up front, so we got to continue to play well up front. I know that we've been able to rotate a lot of backs, but you could have a really good all-state back there, and if you're junk up front, then it doesn't matter.
Sycamore coach Joe Ryan obviously optimistic at 3-0. Just like Genoa Kingston, they came off a big win over Harvard on Friday night, and that's a Harvard team that they've had some trouble with. Talk a little bit about where Genoa's at.
You know, Genoa is exactly where they want to be at 3-0. That was a big win on Friday night over Harvard. Harvard is a team that's been to the Class 4A state quarterfinals each of the last 2 years, and it's a team that's supposed to just hand the ball off and run it down your throat, and Genoa got in the backfield all day long. Plus, on offense, Genoa pulled out every sort of gadget play they had. They had an halfback option. They had 2 onside kicks, one of which was successful. And on offense, they did what they want. At running back, Robbie Thurlby, a sophomore who just got the start that night, was really a revelation, rushing for over 100 yards.
And 3-0 is something that's not common over at Genoa. Talk a little bit about what practice is like.
You know, it was very high-spirited this week. In the beginning of the year, they were high-spirited but sort of wary, I guess, on where they wanted to be. And now 3-0, and they're looking pretty good, so they're very high-spirited.
All right, and I guess the problem for Sycamore is that they're wary just like that, and that they know that they have a backloaded schedule. They have their tough games starting this week, and it's a Canelan team that is a lot different than last year. They had some troubles on defense last year, but then they bring back Joe Thorgeson on their defense, and there's a lot of difference.
Well, when you have a guy that's been around the program for a long time, brings in a passion, brings in a fire, people are going to look at that and they're just going to rub off on them. And you can tell that's already happening. They've had some great defensive efforts already. Last week against Rochelle, 16-12 victory. So, I mean, you can tell that having Joe Thorgeson back has definitely worked out for them.
Sycamore knows this is one of the really important games of the season, starting the conference schedule. Just like Genoa, they start their conference schedule. And what do these conference games mean to these teams?
Well, especially early on, they mean a lot for playoff seeding. If you can get a couple early wins, then you don't have to have a lot of pressure on yourself for the last couple of games and maybe build yourself up to even a top seed, 2, 3, 1 maybe.
All right, and the punt for the playoffs on. We'll be back next week to talk about these conference games. As always, if you got any questions or comments, you can send them to us at sports@daily-chronicle.com. We'll see you next week.